Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Fantastic.
There are other people. That's good.
Yes,
Yeah,
others are joining as well.
that's okay.
Good evening. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you today.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Roy.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good too, thank you. 1 second. Alrighty. There we go. I'm going to start since we're recording. Anyone else that joins will catch up with us, or at least we'll have the recording to watch. So let's get started. Did you all receive the course notes? I sent them via email, so if anyone hasn't received them, please check your junk mail.
Received. Thank you.
You're welcome. So essentially, you've all got what I have got. So everything that I'm presenting is what you have. Be careful because I sent you the link rather than a copy, as it's too large for me to send via Outlook. What I did was I just shared the link. So if you start editing, as a number of people try to do, it'll affect this one that I'm presenting. So save it locally on your machine if you want to do any changes to it. Okay, otherwise it'll affect what I'm presenting. Or the alternative, of course, is for me to save it somewhere else or save it as something else. But that's is inconveniencing. Okay, so welcome. This is day 2 of our ISO 27001 Lead Auditor course, and I'm hoping that everyone can hear me clearly. I don't have to adjust my tone or adjust the audio settings. Good. So going on from yesterday we started to introduce what ISO 27001 was. We looked at the structure of the standard. We looked at as part of just introducing the topic, how it relates to other standards, especially 27002. We also looked at some parts of auditing, basically the principles of auditing, which I said are fundamental, are foundational. These are things that you'll carry in everything you do as an auditor. You live by it as an auditor, essentially. And today we're going to look at the actual conduct of audit. So we call it audit practices, field work, or conducting an audit. And part of what happens in terms of that includes audit planning. You have to plan your audit. Remember, by definition, we said an audit is systematic, it's independent, and it is objective. It's an objective way of checking what auditees or audit clients are claiming to have. Okay, and because it's systematic, you have to plan it. And so we'll talk about it. It's very interesting when you see how audits are planned, especially when you get to the risk-based approach. That is, you are prioritizing where to audit. Remember, we said you don't have to do all audits in a year. You can schedule them, you can plan them and do some this quarter, some another quarter, and on like that. That comes under risk-based approach. Okay? So it's a very important concept. Very, very important. Whether you are interviewing or whether you're trying to convince and close out a deal with clients, if you're a consultant, letting them know you give them value by following a risk-based approach is very useful. We've already looked at evidence-based approach, so we'll look at how evidence is gathered, whether it's documents, whether it's interview, getting evidence, oral evidence, whether you're getting it from a machine, from technology. Evidence will be in so many places. So how do you go about collecting evidence? We'll look at that as well. I remember evidence converts to findings, and findings become conclusions. So we'll look at evidence gathering. Then we'll also look at audit documentation, how to maintain your own documentation. It has to respect the life cycle of documentation. And then we'll talk about communication. We did talk about that as well, how to present your findings or your evidence to findings, your findings to conclusion, and to who. You will do that communication. And then eventually we'll look at follow-up and monitoring. So once you get all these ideas, once you understand them, of course, I don't expect you to understand them tonight. I don't expect you to understand them the 2 weekends we've got. But when you want to become an auditor, you have to start engaging with other auditors, whether in practice, in training, or established and experienced. You have to just imagine you're taking, you are trying to learn a new language. You won't just attend classes and say, oh yeah, I'm now an expert in the language you're learning. You have to start, you have to find places where you would speak with others, where you're going to buy something, you're expressing yourself, you're listening, you're engaging with others. That's the same thing with trying to become an auditor or anything. In fact, that's the way I try to encourage people to look at these things. So don't think you'll become an expert overnight. You have to engage with people. When you call me, so you tell me, Roy, I've got the evidence. Roy, I'm following a risk-based approach. I'm calling you before I'm calling Chris. Okay. So practice what you preach, essentially. Any questions before we start, like from yesterday or so? Has anyone got any questions? I take that as a no, and we start. Now, professional skepticism, as you see that icon there, means you question everything. Whether people are being nice to you, why are they being nice to me? Whether they're being mean to you, why are they being mean? Whether they're being bossy, they're bullying, they're intimidating, they're trying to influence you, they're quick to give you evidence, they're slow to give you evidence. That is professional skepticism. Always put that doubt. Okay? It's called professional skepticism. Before I am convinced, I will give them the opportunity to convince me. Okay? Before you say, oh, I'm convinced, give them the opportunity to convince you. That is called professional skepticism. Okay? And it is crucial for you to maintain objectivity and independence during audits, investigations, and evaluations. You are skeptical. Okay? You question everything, you question assumptions, you seek evidence. Evidence is the only thing that convinces you of any claim. Okay? And it says here, this mindset of being skeptical, of professional skepticism, minimizes risk. It ensures compliance. And of course, it upholds ethical responsibilities. So you won't say, James told me they have a policy, so your opinion will be that they have it. James said they have a data protection policy. You collected it. That is, if it's material, that means it's critical to the audit, you will make sure they have it. And not just that, you will look at the content of it, you look at the format of it, and you see how it's been derived, how it was created, how it is labeled, that it is logical, that it is approved, that it has been communicated, that it's been acknowledged. How is it distributed to those who should have it, not just to anyone? So that is professional skepticism. Before you say, yes, they have a data protection policy, they have told me, I have looked at it, and I have verified it. Okay, so that's just the example. Okay, first question. A, B, C, or D to the question, what is the relationship between ISO 27001 and ISO 27002? What do we think it is? Mr. Stephen has sent his answer. Okay. The majority is saying A. Very good. So this is to basically enhance what we've said. We did talk about the relationship between 27001 and 27001 and 27002, and indeed it is A. 27001 is a standard for information security management system, while 27002 provides guidelines for implementing controls and security measures. That's the difference. 27002 is a reflection of or Annex A in 27001 reflects 27002. So the answer is A. Yeah. Good, good. Well done. As you can see, A is the answer. Now, what about this one? What is information? Okay. Okay. Now we have some differences of opinion. Quite a few say A and the other part say D. So let's see. Is information data that is organized in a meaningful way? Yes, indeed. Is information facts and figures about a topic or a subject? Facts or figures? Yes, it is. And is it knowledge that can be communicated in various forms? Yes, it is. So it is D. Yep, it is D. Information refers to data that has been organized, facts and figures about a particular topic or subject, and also knowledge that can be communicated in various forms such as text, images, audio, and video. What about this one? Okay. 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 Good, good. Majority have sent in their answers. And the question is saying, how often should an organization review and update the ISMS as part of the audit process? You have to remember that audits are done every year and a recertification audit is done the third year. So it means you have to update, capture things, do your own internal audit every year. So the answer is B. You have to review and update your ISMS every year. And there are two kinds of audits. The external one is conducted once annually, and that's a surveillance audit. Yeah, where the ISMS is reviewed as part of the ongoing evaluation, and the other is a full external audit that is more in-depth and is done every 3 years. Okay. This is the flow for the management of an audit program. On the light blue side, you see audit activities. Those are the ones you do for every audit engagement. When you say, oh, we're going to audit, you can do those things in the light blue every quarter. But the audit program is more strategic. So and if you audit 4 times in a year, there will be 4 of the things in the light blue in the dark blue. Okay, so the dark blue is more strategic. That's why you see audit activities breaks out with the arrow. audit program contains planning, execution, monitoring, review, and improvement. That's what an audit uh, that's what an audit process looks like. Planning, doing it, monitoring what you've done, and then improving. And as part of all that, you would have audit criteria and scope. You would have the audit activities that you do. You will have reporting after you do the audit. You will have documentation audit program in the audit program. And then, of course, all of those will depend on the expertise and selection of auditors. The reason why the arrow is coming from the audit activities is that you always evaluate every auditor after every audit engagement. So when they've gone to initiate, do a meeting, collect information and evaluate the information, produce results, document, communicate with management, their roles and responsibilities, review documents, conclude, and then have a final meeting. You will evaluate how everybody has done. You evaluate every auditor and you evaluate the audit team as a whole. Okay? And that is essentially what you do in auditing. That's all. The difference from one audit framework to another is just terminology. But if you understand this, this is what you do when you audit, whether from a long-term perspective, audit program, or whether from a short-term perspective, audit activities. And as you saw, we said everything is based on the roles and responsibilities of auditors, how you select auditors. So you see, they would plan the audit, planning there, they would execute, they would monitor and communicate, they would document the audit, they will report, follow up, and then of course, well, they get better, they develop themselves professionally. So we'll now look at some roles and responsibilities of we'll look at responsibilities and roles of key positions rather. Okay, we can't look at every kind of role, but we'll look at the key ones. So the audit manager would be the one that establishes the extent of the audit program in collaboration or in agreement with the audit client. Okay, they will evaluate the risks for the audit program. They will establish audit responsibilities and procedures, basically select a team and then assign responsibilities to them. They will ensure that the auditors, per their assignment, have all the resources they need, whether it's documentation resources, other kinds of support like technology and stuff. They will ensure they get those resources. And of course, they do a peer review while on site. So every auditor's work will be reviewed by the lead auditor, okay? And they would evaluate the performance of every auditor as well. As you see in the note, it says the person assigned the responsibility for managing an audit program should inform top management on the contents of the program and where necessary, ask for its approval. Don't forget, we said the audit program is strategic. So it means the person responsible for the audit program is, so imagine that there is a dedicated audit department. If they make you responsible for the audit program, you are running the audit business unit or the audit department because it's a program. Okay, so it's strategic. And for every audit you do, you will report or inform top management. Oh, we're going to audit. They approve. Oh, we have audited. This is the outcome. This is the report. They would look at it, they will review it, and they will approve it. Plus the actions that will come out of that. So that is audit program. Okay. They are also responsible for developing the audit plan, including the objectives, the scope, and what methodology to use. And when they go on site, they will introduce all this. This is our audit plan. This is the objective. Is it for certification? Is this to ensure or to check compliance with policy? What kind of audit it is? The criteria as well. And then the methodology. We'll ask for documents. We'll interview so and so. So the plan will contain who you want to interview. And you'll see when we get there that best practice says to interview at least 2 people. and that is for corroboration. Not only should you interview two people, you should check look for two types of evidence. Interview as oral evidence and maybe documentation. And the documentation as well will be two types. Two different people to interview, two types of documentation, and of course, two types of evidence. If you're looking at technology output, two types of outputs from technology, and another type of evidence, maybe evidence interviewing two people as well, different levels in the organization. One managerial or supervisory, and the other reporting to that person you're interviewing. So always two. Execution and oversight. Yeah. So the audit manager also leads the audit team in conducting field work, unless, of course, there's another lead auditor or another team leader. Okay. So if there's a team leader that has been assigned the task of going out to audit, say as an example, 4 audits are happening at 4 different branches at the same time. The audit manager cannot be everywhere at the same time, so they can assign team leadership to others. Okay, but typically they would have the responsibility for execution of the audits and oversight as well. They'll review audit findings, evidence, and documentation to ensure that it's accurate, it's complete, it's logical, and it follows best practice. Okay, so all those principles we talked about of confidentiality and the rest, they will be checking that. They will guide and direct the individual team members as well. Because in terms of communication and reporting, there will be target audiences that have been planned and agreed to. Sometimes they go very high up. So it's very responsible and it's advisable that someone high in the audit team also is the one that communicates with auditees and stakeholders as well. Facilitating meetings and discussions, preparing and presenting the audit reports, and also resolving conflicts that might arise. Okay, so these are just responsibilities. What can we do with all these responsibilities we're putting out there? If you are going for, say, an interview and you have the hands-on experience, you have gathered the hands-on experience, these are some of the things you want to express in your resume or your CV to say. So you must find a way of expressing it in your CV. Now you've done the training, you've got the qualification, you've done some hands-on training, but you need to highlight it on your CV. Planning and coordination will be one title, and you put the developed audit plan, including objectives. So this is already giving you those responsibilities that you would express in your CV. Assigning if you are still doing it, assigned if you did it in your previous role. Okay, but if you want to show what you did as a lead auditor, this is giving you that. Okay, quality assurance, the peer reviewing that you do, you must show that you did that too. If you did that, okay, so your experience must show all the responsibilities of a team leader that you want to highlight. Following up and monitoring as well. If you've done that after audit, did you follow up on corrective actions? Did you call? Did you send emails? Did you ensure that those had been done? Did you go to verify that the corrective actions have been done and then check the effectiveness of it? Because that's all you do in terms of follow up and monitoring. Of course, selecting the audit team. How did you select them? Oh, I refer to clause 7 of ISO 19011-2018 that says you must select audit team members on the basis of their skills, their experience, and qualification. How did you check it? I collaborated with HR. Yeah, we did a background check. We looked at their CV. We did an interview. I've worked with them before. So on this other occasion, and they did very well in that past audit. That was in an oil and gas, that was in telecoms, that was in education. And because we're going to a similar client, I called on so and so auditors to come with me. Okay. So we've looked at the audit team leader, but here now, audit manager. Remember I told you sometimes the audit manager can assign other people with the responsibility of leading out teams. If they're doing 4 at the same time, they might have 3 other team leaders. Okay, so we have responsibility for team leaders that are not audit managers. And what will be different if we have different team leaders and different audit managers? The team leader will not be responsible for the audit program. They'll be responsible for the audit activity when they go out, but not when they go back to the office. There's someone there that is the boss. Okay? So they assist the audit manager. But let's look at some of the responsibilities. Yeah, there you go. The audit manager should assign the responsibility for conducting the audit activity, the individual audit, to a team leader. Okay? They are then responsible for the conduct of the audit at the site they are responsible for, that scope. Okay? So everything that we said about the audit manager, when they go to audit under the execution, the audit team leader will do the same because they are, and this team leadership might be temporary. It doesn't mean if there's another audit at the end of the year, they will still lead a team. It might be someone else because that person might have more experience. So you can have so many lead auditors by qualification, but at every point in time, there must be only one captain of the ship leading out a team. Okay. Yep. So maintain confidentiality, all the things you're checking of the audit client and the auditee, you must also ensure you abide by. Okay. So you cannot be telling them, oh, there's no approval on this document when you don't do it. There's no logical flow to the documentation. Confidentiality of documentation, classification. You must also classify your documents. Okay. And you must also organize them, make sure they're up to date. The versioning, the dating of it, the approval of it. Okay, so who is responsible for monitoring the audit program? Who is responsible for monitoring the audit program? Okay. Samantha, Olan, and Stephen have given us their answer.
Roy, so do you mind me asking, where would you find these documentation standards that you'd be comparing against?
What documentation and standards?
I think in the previous slide, do you mind going when you're done with the question? When you said that you maintain
In accordance with audit standards and requirements?
Yes.
To maintain maintaining organized and up-to-date audit files, records, and documentation. Clause 7.5 of 27,001 is about documentation.
Yeah.
Aha. The organization too, because they would have implemented 27,001. And if they've done that, you must comply to 7.5 documentation. And if complying to that, they would have a policy or procedure, document management procedure at least. So they must comply to that. And you by yourself should comply to that. If you are internal auditor, you are also bound by the policy of the organization. Is that correct?
I think I meant more like, for example, because I understand they are complying with 7.1. I haven't looked at it specifically, but
7.5.
sorry, 7.5.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it specifically, but let's say they don't have version control in the document, or it hasn't been signed off by
Yeah. Very good. So if they've not done that, you are finding that out. You're auditing them. What we're saying is don't be caught out in the same fault.
Yeah.
So if they've not done version control, you are auditing them and telling them it's wrong. It's like telling someone, oh, you've not buttoned your shirt and yours is flying.
Yeah.
So if there's a standard that everybody should follow, you're telling them, oh, you didn't follow that. And if you're bound by the same thing, you should be doing the same thing. That's what we're saying.
Oh, okay.
So there will always be a reference. I remember we'll get there when we'll talk about audit criteria. So the audit standards that we're talking about, the requirements. Remember yesterday I said when we were introducing the course, I said you might do more than 27,001. If you go to do, it might include PCI DSS. It might include something else. So if it does include something else, you must have a reference. There's no audit that will not give you a reference. In giving you the term of reference, or what we call the audit charter, saying Samantha and the team go and audit, they will tell you exactly what to use as your reference,
Okay.
exactly what standards to refer to, and if it will include a regulation. That audit charter is what empowers you to go and audit and empowers you to ask for stuff. So
Oh,
it must be detailed, yeah.
okay, thank you.
No problem.
Just a follow-up question
Yep.
against the backdrop of the question Samantha asked. Who creates the audit charter? Is it the auditor? Is it the
No, no,
lead
no.
auditor?
No, it's the organization. So if you're
Okay.
an internal auditor, the audit charter, of course, audit charters always work with internal audits. The client, the top management. So it's like saying you've created, you have several compartments in your organization offices. You say, okay, that's where all the IT will sit. Who will become the IT manager? You employ them, you assign them tasks, you make them responsible for stuff. So if you want somebody, you have 10 auditors and you want someone to run the audit department, you will give them an audit charter. That's what empowers them to run and be responsible for that audit department. That's the audit charter. Okay.
Okay.
And then for every audit, there is what we call, it's an engagement letter, but there's another technical term, I forget now. So the audit charter is what you use to empower them to run the department. And for every audit engagement, there is, oh my goodness, my head now hurts. It's an engagement letter, but there's another term for it. Audit charter and
Can it be called a policy?
no, it's not a policy. It's just a
Okay.
letter that says go and do so and so audit. So if you are a contractor, it will be a contract. If you are internal, it's an engagement letter, go and audit so and so. And if it's for running the department, is a charter. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, the audit calendar is just a plan. This is a letter. It's an engagement letter. So it's an engagement letter, which is not wrong, but I was looking more for the technical name for it. Okay? So if you are given an audit charter, it empowers you to run a department. And when they need you to go out on audit, say next week, next month, they give you an engagement letter. Don't worry, I'll remember it. Okay? It's an engagement letter. Go on audit. And then if you're a contractor or a consultant, it's a contract, of course. So it's similar to a contract, but because you're internal, it's called an engagement letter. So it is two. This monitoring the audit program is not a job for just about anyone. It is a job for the audit manager. Sometimes the audit manager is the audit team leader, unless they have assigned it to someone else, unless they have delegated it to someone, because they might be doing more than one task. They don't even if it's just one audit, they can still assign a team leader. They don't want to go out to do that, especially in large organizations. The audit manager doesn't go out. It's like a general. They don't go to the battlefront. Yeah, they don't need to. But if you are David, you can send Raya out to the battlefield to go and get burned. Yeah, so yes. So Noel, it's internal audit charter to run the department. That's what ensures that you set up the audit department. It will also say how independent they are, how they should run. So it's basically a document of responsibilities. This is how we want you to run the department. That is the audit charter. You are empowering them. Yeah, I'm making you the audit manager, and this is your responsibility. That's the audit charter. It also includes professionally, it's not correct to say a promise. A commitment is the right word. A commitment to provide resources when you are going out to audit. So there's a commitment behind an audit charter. The engagement letter is saying, no. Engagement letter can be both internal and external, Noel. The charter is for you to run the department. The engagement letter is when you are going out to audit. Oh, we're going to audit this week. We haven't got our engagement letter. So for every audit you go to do, there must be an engagement letter. If you're going, because if this is head office and you're going to Timbuktu to audit, they know you are the audit manager, but they need to be sure that you've been authorized to come this week because it's going to have an impact on their operations. They're going to have to commit resources. That's why an engagement letter is for that particular audit. The internal audit charter is to say we have an established audit department. So the engagement letter can be internal, can be external. Is that okay, Noel?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Very good. So here we go. Homework. We've seen who is responsible for monitoring and oversight, but for the other parts of the audit program, who is responsible for documentation? Is it the general that will be responsible for documentation? Who is responsible for reporting? Who is responsible for follow-up? And of course, who is responsible for professional development? Send your answers to me tonight or during the week. Any questions as we're pushing on? Okay. So now we're looking at ISMS documentation and records. You may have heard me answering Samantha about documentation. That's because our reference is the standard primary reference because there can be more. We might not only be looking at 27,001 to see whether they fulfill the requirements. There might be more. The audit criteria will be defined in the engagement letter. Okay, it must be defined to say we want you to use so and so audit criteria, PCI DSS 27,001. Okay, once it's defined, that means you must look at all those documents and pick out the requirements. When you create your checklist, it must be based on all the audit criteria. I shared the slide, so you must be with that. Didn't you receive the slide? I shared everything with everyone, so you should have it too. So the homework slide should be in the whole presentation that I shared with you. Or did you not receive it? I've shared this slide. Did you not get yours? Oh, okay.
No, I
I'll
didn't
check.
receive that slide.
Okay, maybe it bounced back. So I'll check. I'll share it. Everybody else has received, and I asked when we started. So I'll check to see whether it bounced back, and if not, of course, I'll share with you.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Yep. So we must look at all the places where the requirements are from, and from there, we will audit documentation. So to understand documentation and records in 27,001, we have to look at the documentation requirements. Okay, we'll look at the purpose and importance of documentation. We will look at document control procedures. We'll look at what is called documented information in the standard, how to develop and maintain documentation. We'll look at records management, access controls, and confidentiality. And then, of course, the training and awareness on documentation and how to audit these documents and records. And of course, what documentation there is for certification. So, do this exercise. Did I share? Does everybody have a copy of the standard? Because you need the standard to do this exercise. I want you to write a list. Identify the identification of specific documented information required by ISO. So you go into the standard and look at and try to find everywhere it says documented information should be kept. Okay, so I need you to go to the standard and pick that out, write it out. And then the clauses that deal with creating, maintaining, and controlling documented information. If you don't have the standard, please indicate now, and I'll share it with you. So we're going to pause to do that exercise, but if you don't have a copy of the standard, let me know now. We're going to take 15 minutes to do this exercise. Okay, Samantha. All right.
Can you project the page you just took off now where we have the task?
Okay. Do you have the copy of, because I'll be sharing the answer with you if I do that. So if you have a
I'll
copy of, if you have a
I'll
copy of the
refer
slide,
to
yeah. Aha. Okay, let me send the standard to Samantha, and I'll see you
Right.
at
What
8.
what page was that? Right.
That was page 78.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. See you guys back at 8. Samantha, the standard is on your way. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay. So what did we get? Tell me your approach. What was your approach? Or have we not finished?
Going through the clause 4 to 10 to
Very
try and
good.
find where it says that the organization should retain document information about different
Very good.
clauses. So just,
Fantastic.
so I kind of started from, I'm just hoping that I did it correct.
No problem.
So starting from clause,
Oh,
scope of the ISMS, which is 4.3,
what? Because the standard says the scope shall be retained as
retained.
documented information.
Yes,
So
that's,
anyway, you see documented information, that's a
yes,
requirement. Shall
shall.
documented information.
Yeah. So that's how I started. So I think the first one was the scope, which is 4.3.
Yep.
And
Then there
then the next
was
one was
5.2.
5.2, then 6.12, 6.2,
Yep.
7.2, 7.5. That's as far as I got.
Okay, fantastic. What about question 2? Anyone? What clause deals with criteria for creating, maintaining, and controlling documented information?
Is that 7.5, yeah.
7.5 point something. So it's specific.
I think
7.5
it's
is documented.
5.3.
7.5.3. Yes. Very good. So for the first one, this is the overview of document information, where the requirements are. You see information security policy 5.2, 4.3 for the scope, 6.1.2, it says that you should keep documented information about the risk assessment process. Statement of applicability 6.1.3D, information security objective 6.2, evidence of competence 7.2, operational planning and control 8.1, monitoring and measurement of the ISMS 9.1, internal audit program 9.2, management review records 9.3, non-conformity and corrective action records 10.1, and then continual improvement records 10.2. Other documented information or other documentation include that's so these ones are required by the standard. That's why they are mandatory. But 7.5.1 says there can be other documented information that the organization will determine that is necessary to make the ISMS effective. So some have been required by the standard, but the organization should add to that by determining by itself. So additional documents and records can be determined by the organization as being necessary to make the ISMS effective. What does that mean? For the auditor, if you go and there's a non-conformity, or they didn't do this well, or there's a risk that is happening because, and the root cause is documentation. So as an example, they are making errors. Why are there errors? Because somebody knows how to do stuff, but when it's not there, nobody else knows how to do it. and they've not documented the process, and it's material or it's critical, it has an impact on their operations, or it has an impact that is above their risk appetite, you would then say, oh, documentation. You should have determined documentation. You should have created documentation that would ensure continuity of that operation. Okay, so where documentation is the cause, they should have. So they should have determined documentation that will make the ISMS effective. If there's anything affecting the effectiveness of the ISMS, then of course, that's a non-conformity. 7.5.3, records. Documentation necessary to provide evidence of conformity to the requirements and effective operation of the ISMS. They go hand in hand. So we're saying documentation plays a crucial role in ISO, like I just told you, for continuity, for making the ISMS effective, and even for complying to regulation and contractual obligation outside of the ISMS, but pointing or indicating that it needs to be checked. Okay, and it can be both electronic and paper-based documentation. And this documented information we're talking about includes policies, procedures, records, and other documents that provide evidence of the implementation, of the operation, of the monitoring, and of the continual improvement of the ISMS. Basically, the PDCA of the ISMS. So you need documentation that will show that they are maintaining the ISMS correctly. Documents should be controlled according to 7.5.3 to ensure that they are current, to ensure that they are approved, and that they are accessible to authorized and relevant personnel. Okay, they must be clear, concise, and should match the organization's objectives. Why do we need documentation? To provide evidence, to show that the ISMS is effective, to ensure consistency, accountability, and also to see that if there are any regulatory requirements, you are fulfilling the requirements as well. Okay? And these are the types of documents. Take a note of their purpose, which is in the boxes to the right. Policy as an example. They are an expression of management's intention. We must. So when there is a closing time or a starting time, that's management policy. When there is zero tolerance to something, that's management policy. When there is a instruction or direction that we must contribute a certain amount every year to a certain charity or foundation, it's management that decides that. If there is no expenditure above such and such limit, it's management that decides that. They put all of those kinds of things in policy. What you must do, what you must not do, what you can do, what you cannot do, is always in policy. And it then gets interpreted by business or department heads by selecting standards. So if management wants the best in class identity and access management, the IT manager would then go and look out for a standard that expresses that best in class IAM. If if management is talking about what's it called now? Responsible spending and forecasting, budgeting, then the head of finance will look for a standard that would help him implement that in the organization, because management has expressed it in policy. We must comply to data protection. We must be responsible to comply to GDPR. Then, if they've got a data protection officer or a head of privacy, they would go and bring GDPR and any other privacy standard or regulation, and they would then create procedures. Procedures are basically you customizing or localizing standards. So the standards are there, but when you adapt it to your own environment, you use procedures to adapt it in your own environment. We will do it in this way. The standard says 14 characters of password, uppercase and lowercase. How would you implement it? You will create procedures for the IT administrator to say, oh, they want us to do 14 characters. This is how we'll implement it. We'll implement it in Outlook, or we'll implement it in the Windows operating system. They will need a procedure. That procedure can be used by any administrator, anyone that has the privilege to do that, that has the rights and the responsibilities to do that. So policy, direction, standard, how to do it. Procedure, standard basically is the view of experts, industry experts. Yeah, that's industry consensus. And then the procedure is how you want to do it in your own environment. Okay, you want to interpret what the experts say. You want to adapt it in your own environment. And then guidelines, where standards are not there, the guidelines would tell you how to do it. Okay, so ISO 27001 is a standard. 27002 is a guideline, how to do it. Okay, because when you look at the annex, it doesn't tell us how to do it, so it's absent. And that's why we need 27002. Then you have forms and records, which is basically evidence that you've done. Remember, policy is what must be done. Forms and records is there to say we have complied to policy by following all this way from policy down. We've now done it. Now, where does this all start? Look at the little box at the top there. Okay, they are called external drivers. So if we're talking about data protection, why do we have data protection policy? Because of a regulation. It could also be because of legislation. So everything, the way organizations behave, the way they do things, yeah, it all comes from external drivers. Legislation, standards, industry codes of practice, your professional associations, before you then implement them in your organization. Yeah, remember the illustration I gave about driving. This is a way of looking at risk appetite. If you come to an organization and say, oh, where can I find their risk appetite? Look at all their policies. The risk appetite is there, even if they don't have it separate. But of course, you can give yourself that task to go through all the policies and pull out all the must or we must not. We have zero tolerance. That's the risk appetite. So you can pull it out and create a risk appetite document. Does that make sense? So if you ever get asked about risk appetite are embedded in policies. We must close at 8. Just like in the home, you say bedtime is 10. That's policy. You have zero tolerance to keeping the night. Okay? So that's the risk appetite. And auditors would measure, the audit against all those kinds of statements. And remember, it is expressed, it is in standards, it's in regulation. So you are auditing them against standards, policies, regulations, and laws. That's what we always refer to. Any questions before I move on?
Yes, Roy.
Yes, go on.
Just specific to risk appetite, and apologies if I'm deviating slightly from the
You're not.
focus of this.
That's
If an organization decides to write a risk appetite statement, must it also write or refer to a risk tolerance possibility, or should it just be a risk appetite statement that it writes?
Right. Risk statements, risk appetites, they are not law. They are recommendations. It makes it easier for everybody. So nobody will hold you to account to say, oh, you've not put risk tolerance. It makes it easier for people to do. So if there are errors, people are not, it's because, oh, we don't have a risk, we don't know what the risk tolerance is. So if it is expressed, it makes it easier for people, but nobody will fine you or punish you for not doing that.
Okay. All right.
Having said that, there are industries like financial industries where you have to say it. So in the financial sector, it is not a recommendation, it's not guidance, it is the law. Because if you don't know it, people spend. Tolerance is your exception. And what does that mean? Let me explain what appetite and tolerance is. Appetite is saying, this is what you will not do above. That's your limit. You can't take more than that. Okay? Tolerance is saying, on special occasions, we will breach that level. Okay, we'll go a bit more. We'll take a bit more risk. We'll allow a bit more. That's tolerance. And it should not be permanent. So when you want to go beyond what management has approved as your appetite, you need to write to get approval for it. It's an exception. So that's exception management. When you hear exception management, it's because you're going above your appetite, or people are going above the appetite. Okay? If you're driving on the motorway, the speed limit is 70 miles per hour. That's the risk appetite. You want to go faster than that, but the law says 70 miles per hour. But can you go more than 70 miles per hour?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
slightly
Plus
above.
10%, slightly above. So there's a tolerance, there's a buffer. That's tolerance. Okay. So this is what policies look like. There is corporate policy. Corporate policy is what everyone in the organization must comply to. But then there is technical policy. Technical policy are they are specific to technology. So you can have firewall policy or Cisco AD ASA policy. Yeah. So those are technical policies. And then you have end user policies. These policies, technical policies and end user policies, are sometimes called standards. That's why you see in our previous picture, a drop from policy was standards. So standards are industry consensus, technical policy, end user policy. They are sometimes referred to as standards and sometimes even standard operating procedures. So it's just a technical term, okay? And then below standards, we have procedures. Some frameworks put procedures above standards, like QMS, quality management systems. They have procedures before standards, okay? Document control procedures within ISO 27001 is how you approve documents, how you distribute, how you control access, who do you give access to, how you control versioning as well. Basically, it is related to the life cycle of documentation. Okay, it handles creation, identification, and all that, making sure that it is controlled. Not everybody has access, but it's accessible to those who are relevant to have it. It is controlled. It is distributed to those who should have it. They acknowledge receipts. Okay, you control access. That is, organizations must create document control procedures, make it accessible to those who should have it, and don't allow those who shouldn't have it. Yes, so this is the document lifecycle. Okay, from creation to death. Some frameworks make it simple, just 4 steps: creation, reading, using, and disposal. CRUD. But of course, it's much more than that because you classify the documents, basically saying whether it's public, whether it's confidential, whether it's top secret, and that way people will know how to handle it. So you put a mark in because it's top secret. This is how we'll use it. This is how we'll destroy it. 7 times shredding, or we'll use uh we'll outsource it. We'll use a contract company to dispose of it because of its classification. Okay, so all that is defined. And then based on its classification, based on the level of document, is it a level 1? Now, one thing I forgot to tell you, the documents have levels. So policy is level 1 document, standard level 2, procedure level 3, guideline level 4. So level 1 to 4. Depending on the level, they must be approved at the right level. Who should approve level 1 policy? Must be exec, must be top management. So when you look in ISO 27000, where all the places where it says top management shall, they are responsible for that. And any corporate policy must be approved by top management. So auditors will check who approved this document. That's because if top management did not approve it, there's no commitment. It will be loose. People can flout rules. They might not follow it because they say, oh, it's the IT manager that signed it. I'm more senior than him, or I've been here for longer than he's been, or he's my peer. Okay, so that's why the right level must sign the right documents. And after it's approved, it should be distributed to a distribution list. Yeah, the relevant personnel, internal and external, and they must acknowledge. So acceptable use. Oh, they've given me this document. Do I like what it says? If I do, I acknowledge it. That means they can now hold you accountable. Because when you've read it, maybe it says you should always come to work at 8 a.m. and you say, okay, I agree. They can then say you read it, you acknowledged it. 2 days in a week you came at 9. So the aim of acceptable use is to be able to hold people accountable to what they have they've read, what you have communicated. Okay. And then archiving and retention. How long should we keep the documents? You must create a retention schedule. Say this kinds of documents, this is how long we'll put it. And that's where laws come in, regulations come in, and standards. As an example, from the Employment Act, it says how long anything that has to do with recruitment should last. How long should we keep CVs that we collect? I think it's 6 months. In the health sector, the NHS is an example. There's a defined period that you can keep people's records as well. Okay, so it all points back to what we said here, the external drivers. You don't create documents without looking at why did we create it. It all points back to the drivers. That way you can say how long you'll keep the documents. If it's data protection, they also have how long. Remember, in your privacy policy that you publish for everyone to see, part of the policy, there's a retention, how long you're keeping people's data. So that's the same thing there. And then the disposal. Now, for auditors, with regards to documentation, this is the criteria they use. They look at content, they look at format, and they look at the life cycle that we just talked about. So when auditors come and they are auditing documents, they're looking at the content. Is it relevant? Is it reliable? Is it logical? Is it saying what it should be saying? So they will be looking to see that the content has been planned and is saying what it should say, and that the format is uniform, is consistent. You have defined templates for all your policies. This is what they should look like. Your procedures look like so and so. Okay. With regards to the content again, what I mean by logical is they'll look at each paragraph, the content. Paragraph down should not negate a statement before it. Okay, so it must be logical. It must be saying what it should say. They haven't rushed to put things together. So you must look at the content to say whether it's reliable, whether it's relevant as well. Okay. And of course, the life cycle, they'll look at why was it created? Oh, there's a driver. Is it properly identified? Yes, they have a defined way of identifying all their documents. Do they have a classification? Do they obey that classification? Have they been obeying it, or have they been violating it? Is there a definition of security for all kinds of classifications? Who approved this document that you've asked for? Was it approved by the right person? Who has access to it? Did they accept to use it? Was there an acknowledgement? And then, of course, a retention schedule and all. Any questions? I want somebody else to engage with me so that I won't be the only one talking. Okay. So when auditors review documents, that's what we're going to look at now. We'll see how they find common issues, how they see gaps and deficiency in documentations. And these are the techniques for reviewing and examining documentation. They do document sampling. What does document sampling mean? What's the concept of document sampling?
It's the process of picking.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Pro-
Olan.
It's the process of picking out of many few ones that we just think will be enough for us as
Very good.
evidence.
Okay, so it's basically picking some out of many. Chinere, we're going to say the same thing.
Yes, so that there is a good spread in terms of what's covered. So depending on what you're looking at. So
Yeah.
you're not just assuming you're looking at across different departments of checking the same thing, then you might pick from different teams, just or different levels, depending on the
There's always
scope
there's
of
always
what
a put very good. Yes. There's always the potential of a time constraint with manual processes. If you're not doing this if it's not an automated thing, you are coming there to audit. You might not have all the time to check all the documents, it might be so much, but you would do sampling is accepted. Yeah. You might not be able to check all computers in an organization. You can do sampling. So in this case, sampling also applies to documentation. Picking out some documents using the right sampling method to ensure that it is representational of the same, of all. During elections, they do things like polling and survey to say, oh, the projection is so and so person is going to win. There's always a margin of error, but it's always a good reflection of what's going to happen. Okay. They can also look at checklists. They can create a checklist to do their reviews. They can host document review meetings. They can do cross-referencing. These documents, in documents, you sometimes have references or other related documents, so they can cross-reference. Oh, it says it's referencing business continuity policy, and the business continuity policy is supposed to say this because it has said other related documents. But when you check it, it's not saying that, so you can cross-reference documents. Okay. Then of course, traceability analysis is basically you find a record, you want to see that everything that they do is traceable to policy and policy to external drivers. Okay, so you do traceability analysis. Peer review is, as the name implies, is basically reviewing what somebody else has done, especially in auditing here now. If there are gaps, you do a gap analysis. A risk-based review is, even though you are doing sampling, you also want to prioritize it. So that's a risk-based review. You can also do a document version control review and a compliance review, where each one has a driver that is based on an external driver that is based on compliance that they need to comply to. You can see whether or not they comply. Oh, they're supposed to have this document. Do they have it? That's one compliance check. The document says they must do blah, blah. Are they doing it? That's another way of doing a compliance check.
Roy, if we
Yeah.
go back to the sampling,
Mm.
document sampling, this is a game of statistics.
Mm.
How do you get the right kind of spread that makes it representative?
If you are an external auditor, you are given what kind of sampling to do. So if you're not the team leader should understand sampling. If you're doing this for the first time and you're going to lead, there is what we call audit guide. Remember, I told you, just like we have 27,002 to guide us on implementing controls, we also have audit guides, 19,011 for one. 27,007 is another audit guide. It's an ISMS audit guide. So this course has been built based on 19,011 and 27,007. And in there, there's what's called sampling guide, or sampling rules. Sorry, the sampling rules comes in 27,006 to say when to use random sampling, when to use stratified sampling as an example, how to know what the sample size should be is in 27,006. So if it's this size organization, there are 0 to 50 people. This is the kind of sampling, the number of sampling to to take. Okay, so you remember we said when you audit, you must follow best practice. Best practice is looking at standards, looking at guidelines. Okay, so when you're picking sampling, you can't just come and say, oh, I'll look at only 2. The peer review, well, if I'm peer reviewing other auditors, one of the things I'm checking is, why did you pick 2 out of 50? You didn't follow any sampling rule. Oh, I just thought I would take only 2. No, there's always a method to the madness. Okay, so you would refer to the sampling rule, and as part of your report, you say, I picked 5 because there was a total of this number, and I used random sampling, okay, as advised, as recommended, or as directed by the lead auditor. Or if you use any other sampling, you must also justify why you use that kind of sampling method. So there is sampling rule, and it is found in ISO 27006. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And I think he answered the second inevitable one, which is you've got to document your justification for what
You have to justify, absolutely. Because every piece of work you do is reviewed by someone. Remember, when you're working, all you're doing is finding evidence. Even your evidence, when it's in your own hand, it's still just evidence. When you share it with another auditor, it then becomes a finding. When you then agree and present it, it then becomes a conclusion. Yeah. So before you go anywhere, that's even the sampling. Why did you pick this number? Must be checked. Every piece of work you do for quality, because that quality assurance we talked about, everything must be checked. Okay.
I thought that was a good question because I was asked that question in an interview. So
you still see?
yes, so we need to justify reason why we use.
Well, Olan, I always ask that anything they ask you in interviews, please share it with me so that I'll educate other people in my podcast and stuff like that. You didn't tell me that.
Roy, can I just ask you a question? You know all these ISO documents, apart from 27,001 and 27,002. So when you mentioned 27,006 and all the other related,
7, yeah.
yeah. So I'm wondering. Okay, I'm just googling it. I think we can get it free.
Yeah, you can get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
see,
because that's extra, extra reading and things to do.
no, don't worry.
Understanding.
Don't worry. You remember what I said in the group chat? I said this course is different from the others. So we're going to give you a list of resources as part of this course. And even though we cannot share all these documents because of licensing issues, we can share certain documents, we can share certain templates, and even we have audit guide that we're creating to complement this course.
Yes, I remember you said that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah,
no
templates
problem.
and stuff. Thank you.
Absolutely. And don't forget that ISO 27000 is free. It is very rich. Don't take it for granted. It contains a lot of things, definitions, and even the overview of all the standards. Okay. So ISO 27000 27000 is free.
Thank you.
No problem. Yes, so 1 second, someone is sending me a message. Can I be added to the group? Oh yes, Samantha, you don't even need to ask. Everyone that comes that does training with me gets added to the group.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned podcasts just now. Where do you send your podcasts to? How come we don't get the links?
So, Chris, I think you want me to find you. Anyway.
Podbean.
Yes, Podbean. It's on Podbean and also YouTube. I've got a YouTube channel. So this course will be hosted. We'll upload it to YouTube as well. Yes, Podbean. Don't worry, I'll still share the links after the session. Okay? Is that okay, Chris?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So when we review documents, don't forget, why are we talking about documents? Is this all we're going to say? No, that's not all. But a lot of what happens during audit is talking and checking documents because you are not there the past 12 months. So you are looking at records and what they've done and what they've committed to do, their plans, their policies, their procedures, and of course, evidence, the records. Don't worry, Noel, everybody will get added to it. Okay? So documentation then is important. We're going to look at documents. We're going to look at policy. We're going to look at practices. We're going to look at outputs from technology. But for documentation, you verify, you assess, and you identify. What do you verify? Oh, that the document is there to start with. That if they claim that they have so and so policy, where is it? Whether electronic or paper, you would verify the existence. Okay, remember, we just looked at the list of mandatory documents. That means an auditor must say, right, this list of documents, let me see them. At least check those things that are mandatory, and then you can check others. But you need to check those mandatory ones. So the existence of them to start with, and then you check whether it's accurate. It's a reflection of what it should. It contains, remember, content, format, and the life cycle, so that it's complete, it's accurate, it's logical, it's relevant, it's reliable. Yeah, you assess that. Then you, before you start identifying deficiencies, inconsistencies, gaps, and other things in the document. Okay. Yep. So that's what we just said. The procedure for documentation review includes reviewing the documents, gathering evidence, depending on what has been agreed. So whether you are taking copies of it, you must, or just taking notes, it all depends on what has been agreed during the initial audit meeting or according to the audit plan. Don't forget that for auditors, you are evaluated on how much of the audit plan you completed. So that audit plan you must be implemented. Okay. And if you say this is how we are going to collect evidence, you must follow that through. And then, of course, interviews and inquiries. Remember, I said documentation and interviews. Those are the main things. That's always what happens during audit. Then there can be other stuff as well, sampling, mathematical evidence, technology outputs, testing. You don't always test, and especially auditors must not operate the technology themselves for evidence. They should use an operator, a technician, or an administrator within the auditee or audit client. If you need something from, say, a technical evidence from technology, don't operate the technology yourself. That's evidence contamination. Yeah, I know it's something some law enforcement people in some places don't respect. But whether you are a pen tester, whether you are a forensic investigator, whether you are an auditor, you don't touch technology yourself because you can affect the operation of it or it can affect the integrity of the technology. So best practice says to use someone to reproduce what you want. So if they tell you the technology has produced this or firewall rule has been set and you want to confirm that, you don't have to, you must not be the one to send the command on the machine or the computer. You can ask an administrator or an operator to show you to bring it out, to print it out, or to bring it up on the screen. Okay. I did say sampling techniques are available, and these are just some of them. There is random sampling. If you use sampling, you justify what sampling technique you use. So if you use random sampling, it means you've selected documentation samples randomly, maybe from every department you've taken to, but they've all been done randomly. There's always a reason for doing random sampling above stratified. When would you use each one? In 27006, it tells you their uses, their advantages, and where, examples of where they should be used. Okay. Stratified sampling, you are categorizing documentation based on maybe risk significance, or yes, they've got, each one has got category. So as an example, they might all be, the categories might be data protection category, documentation for data protection from another category like IT or IT administration. So you can do certified sampling from each category, take certain documents. Remember, I also said you can do it in terms of the level. So you have level 1, policy, level 2, standard, level 3, procedures, and level 4, guidelines. So it can be put into that category as well. And then judgmental sampling is based on auditor judgment and expertise. In some text, it actually says that is not regarded as true statistics or true sampling, but it can happen. Okay, if it does, you must justify why that was used above anything else. The records are level 5. It's not an official level. So everything we said from 1, policy, standards, procedures, and guidelines, to show that you have done what you intended to do in policy, records are produced. That's where evidence really is kept. So if you say we record everybody that visits our premises in our guest book, the evidence, the record is a list of those that come. If you say 10 people attended the training, the attendance sheet is therefore the record. Okay, so it supports the effectiveness of the ISMS. It must be traceable to policy or even the drivers. Okay, if you are checking or auditing access controls and confidentiality, you're basically saying only authorized individuals can view or modify documents. So who had access? Was there a definition of roles? And did they maintain that or did they violate that? And it may be based on confidentiality needs. So you look at user authentication, who was allowed access? Was it properly defined? It can also be role-based access. So it might not be individuals, it might be according to roles. Encryption would be only those who have the key will be able to have access to the documents, especially if they're electronic. And then, of course, if it's paper-based, you're looking at physical security. Training and awareness is like acknowledgement. If you train people, you can hold them accountable. Okay. And then finally, documentation for certification. Mandatory documents and then those other documents according to 7.5.3 that the organization has determined to be necessary for the effectiveness of the ISMS. Okay, how do they organize it? It's down to them, but it must be accessible. It must be easy for the auditor to navigate through. If it's not easy for the auditor, you can imagine that it's not easy for people in the organization. Okay, so the accessibility is also a problem. It's also something. But at the end of the day, when we get to scoring the audit, documentation is not always a problem unless it affects the effectiveness of the ISMS. So if it stops a control from being effective, as an example, because the documentation isn't there, availability is affected. And then not just affected, you must also look at the risk appetite. How does it affect the effectiveness of the ISMS before it becomes a problem? But when we're considering documentation and controls, auditors prefer that there isn't documentation. Remember, I'm saying prefer. They prefer that the documentation does not exist, but the control is there and it is effective, than that you have all the documents, but the control is either not there or is there and it's not effective. Okay, so documentation and controls, when you're comparing the two, the preference is that the control exists and it does the job. It's just that you didn't have documentation or documentation is poor and it doesn't affect the effectiveness of it. Okay, so if you have to compare the two, I'd rather that the control exists and that it's effective and you're just not good with documentation than, oh, you have the best document management, but the control is rubbish. Okay. Now let's take this application question as well. let's look at this. You are leading an audit team that has been tasked with conducting a review of the document management system, and this of a healthcare facility to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements and standards. Describe your approach to conducting document review and examination that would ensure thoroughness, accuracy, and relevance in assessing the documented information. So do you want to do this in groups, or would you want to take 10 minutes to come back with answers for it? Basically, I just want to know your approach.
Logistics of doing it in groups might be difficult.
Okay. Let me see.
That's my view, though. I'm happy to go with whatever every other person thinks.
I can actually create breakout rooms.
Okay, maybe that's better then.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you guys in rooms. For those who have sound problems that have communicated it to me, you don't have to. You can write to me, okay? But I'm going to assign you automatically to 2 breakout rooms. And so we come back, we reconvene at 9 o'clock. I'm going to set the timer. Okay, let's see.
What page of the slide is this, please?
Sorry?
What page of the slide?
101.
Thank you.
Okay, see you back at 9 o'clock. Hello, welcome back.
Thank you.
I hope I have helped reduce some calories with this exercise that you did. So, which group wants to go first? What I need from you is a description of your approach. Basically, tell me how you will get to do this document review of the document management system. So what did we agree? Just appoint someone to speak on your, to represent you and speak.
For group 2.
Okay,
So we agreed in group 2 that before we commence the process, we've already planned and scoped the definition of the document review. So we understand the regulations, requirements, we understand the industry standards, and we understand the policies we are reviewing against.
okay,
And
very good.
then we proceed to the sampling strategy. And we select a sample of documents for review and consider random sampling factors, basically. And then we proceeded to the review criteria. We stated that we need to develop a clear criteria for assessing the documents. And this criteria include the accuracy, that is verifying that the information is correct, up to date and consistent, the completeness of the documents, ensuring that all necessary elements are included, i.e. signature, dates. Another criteria is the relevance of the document, whether it aligns with the organizational goals and regulatory requirements as stated or identified in the planning and scoping stage. The accessibility of the documents as well. And then we went on to talk about gathering of evidence, screenshots, audit trails, basically. We went on to now say that we would now develop a report and make recommendations. I need to state that all of these aren't all the steps. We haven't exhausted the steps basically to go by, but these are some of the things we mentioned.
It's the approach that I'm interested in. Very good. Okay, good. Team 1.
Samantha, are we team 1? Sorry, I'm not sure.
Yes, you are.
Oh, room 1. Okay. So, Samantha, do you want to go ahead and speak? Or should I? I don't know. Go ahead.
You can if you want to.
No, go ahead. Okay. You can.
I think my idea was slightly, the way my process I thought was slightly different to what we discussed in the group. That's why I thought Shania would go ahead, but I can say what my understanding of the process.
Okay, so let Chini represent, then you would talk on behalf of yourself. If you're deviating, then you will speak differently.
Although I mean the first group have covered a lot of what we would. So we start off with, because it's a health environment and it's very clear around compliance with regulatory requirements, which is something and the organizational standards, which always informs on the policy. So that's a starting point, which health is an area that we know is very sensitive to how data is used and stored and so on. So we need to kind of look at the regulatory requirements around data. We talked about data protection, GDPR. We talked about any other standard that we can look at that cover whatever is identified in the audit scope. So we kind of imagine that there is obviously a scope that we've been given, and then that would then inform on the policies that we're looking at, just similar to the previous speaker and the group. And then we then look at using the some of the things around the policy standards, that triangle. And then in doing that, we then look at how we determine how the documentation, how they stored, that whole cycle, looking at the sampling that we will use, and then I'm just trying to look at it. Then the version control, peer review, how it's all done, checklists, and then course, how they store the documents, do they, how they've shared it, are people aware? So that whole cycle that we discussed in the last hour. So applying that in terms of ensuring thoroughness, accuracy, and relevance, obviously linking it back to the policy and standards. So always that whole cycle needs to show.
So
and that's how we gather evidence and verify. And then that then informs on the reports.
Very good.
So Samantha, you can go ahead now.
Thank you. I thought that would need, well, I'm sure we agreed as well, but I thought that there'd need to be planning where we would define the scope of the audit and the and include the specific regulatory requirements like the Data Protection Act and GDPR concerning the healthcare industry. I guess I think in the UK it's just, I'm not quite sure what specifically it is, but GDPR, Data Protection Act.
Yep.
And then we would sample documents, whether it's risk-based sampling or random or stratified. I guess we would find a justification for which sampling we would use. When we're doing the document review, we would check for compliance, making sure that the documents are have the relevant regulations, and examining the integrity of the documents, making sure that they're complete and are properly version controlled. Also making sure the documents are classified and stored safely, and that only the authorized people have access to these documents. Also, cross-referencing, making sure that the documents can be traced back to the origin. And I think it's also, I thought it was important to engage with relevant stakeholders, making sure that they can explain, or maybe we can understand the context of why and how the documents were created and how they're used. And also, I think analyzing and then creating reports from the findings and the recommendations that we come up with from these findings. I think I had read something about afterwards doing a continuous monitoring to make sure that there's like a scheduled follow-up to assess how the recommendations have been implemented, and if they have been corrective, or if there has to be some sort of improvement or change. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yep, that's fine. So each team has done very good work, very good work. But what I want you to take a note of is that there are two parts to this question. There is the task and there is the background. The background is the big picture. So what I've found is every answer has concentrated on the task. Well, not completely correct. You did mention, each of you mentioned the regulatory requirements and the organizational standards, which is fine from the background. But what is missing is the background says you are leading an audit team, tasked. So the task starts from the background. You have been tasked with conducting a review of the document management system. And then it's of a healthcare facility. And then they're asking you to describe your approach to conducting a document review. So you're going to do a document review, but you are reviewing the document management system. So what document management system are they using? I shared the slides for this course using OneDrive. It's a document management system that does storage. But what about the other stuff? So OneDrive is not a complete document management system. So you first need to know what document management system they're using. If they tell you SharePoint, why did they select SharePoint? And is it on premises or is it in the cloud? Do they have their own server? So it starts to tell you what else to look at. You are auditing the document management system and then looking at how it is producing documents and then the life cycle. So the life cycle that you talked about is good, but if the document management system is faulty from the selection, do they have a supplier? Do they have maintenance contract? You have to look at the document management system. Is it consistent? Does it handle the document life cycle well? Or is it not effective? Do they have problems? So you're going to look at the document management system as well. Does it all make sense?
Yes, thank you.
It
No
does.
problem. Fantastic. So that's whether for interview or anywhere else, auditors, professional skepticism. What should I be looking at? How should I be thorough? Should I be thorough? Yeah, don't just take things at face level. What differentiates one auditor from another is the depth of review that you do. So as an example, if you've been tasked with auditing policy, one auditor might say, oh, right, this is the data protection policy. Right. Yeah, that's the title. It's been signed, and that's it. While yet another will say, right, let me look at the contents, and they read everything. Let me look at, especially where they have gauged the importance of doing that check. So if it's critical, then you have to do a thorough audit. And that's why we gave this background to say, see, the background means it is important to check this thing. So if one auditor has only checked for the existence of the policy, while another is checking the content, the format, and the life cycle, who signed it? Is it the right font? Why is it Times New Roman here? Or yeah, Times New Roman there. And on the next page, it's Aptos. Yeah, so they are thorough. They're looking at tenses, they're looking at grammar, they're looking at relevance. So if there needs to be a reference to regulation, have they put the reference there in that document? So yeah, so that's how you differentiate auditors. Okay, let me see how much more we can do. Yes,
Quick one, right?
yes, sure.
So
Go ahead.
if you find minute details, or let me not call them minute, but details like font not being consistent, what then? I mean, this is not affecting the application, but then the controls are affecting.
That's why I said you don't know. Don't forget that this says to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements and organizational standards. So there is a reference, but you can't just go somewhere and say, oh, your font is wrong. It might not be anything, might be insignificant. They don't even have to correct it. So if you even point it out, they don't have to correct it. But if there is rules, so as an example, this is our business, and for us, because we might be a marketing company, and a marketing company have to get their presentation correct. So the management may have put it in policy that fonts must be so and so. It affects their sales, it affects their revenue, their bottom line, and blah blah blah. They're a publishing company. Publishing company are very, for them, presentation is top because it affects their reputation. So the criticality of fonts is important for a publishing company or a marketing company or a web publishing company, but not so much for a financial company or a consulting firm.
Context.
So context is always important. Yeah. So this is the section where we'll close. It'll be an intro into, remember we started with audit practices, and audit planning is one of those. So we're going to look at audit planning and preparation. And let me see where we'll stop. Because when we started, I said, when we get to planning, there's an interesting aspect of planning that I want you to see. but maybe we'll not cover it tonight, and maybe we will. So let me see where we'll stop. Yes, we will do up to, we'll finish up to here. Yeah. So you'll see. Please bear with us. It's a very interesting section of the course. So we're going to talk about audit planning and preparation as part of audit practices. And of course, the planning we've said is the responsibility of the team leader, especially if it's been assigned by the audit manager. If the audit manager is the team leader, then of course he's responsible for planning. Pre-audit preparation are the things you do before you even plan. What are those things in the background that you do to get ready for audit? And this is what we have broken it down into. You are gathering the security policies, you are reviewing previous audit reports, you're asking them to give you, remember I told you, the risk appetite is taken from the policies. That's why you're gathering the policies. Okay, all the relevant policies you gather, they're saying, right, this is what the regulation is. You're looking at commitment to legal requirements, you're looking at commitment to contractual obligations, you're seeing what their appetite is. And so you're now creating a checklist. You're looking at their previous failings. Where are they struggling? Where are their pain points? And because audit is a risk assurance function, you're also thinking of how do we help them? You're not thinking of where will we catch them? Okay, auditors are not investigators. They are not police. They're not law enforcement. It's to see that they conform, yeah, than to see that they don't conform. So even if you go and your work is that they are in conformity, you didn't find a fault. Let's just say that theoretically, it doesn't mean your auditor is bad. You must not catch them at not doing stuff before they say, oh, you're a good auditor. Okay? So you then develop your checklist after looking at previous audit reports to help them to enhance your own audit as well. And then conduct the kickoff meeting, identify key risk areas. That's the one I was telling you that we'll look at. Very, very important. What are the key risk areas? Because when you know the key risk areas, you're looking at the previous audit reports, you identify key risk areas, you would then assign auditors based on their qualifications, their capabilities, their competence. Yeah, you are evaluating, I'm going to put Samantha there, Chinyere will do that. Chris, Rennie, Henry, Stephen will go into the different places. Noel, yeah, where all your strengths are. You look at people's strengths. You look at where they would do well to affect the audit positively. Yeah, so you identify the relevant policies, locate the documents, collaborate with stakeholders, review and evaluate the policies. So if there are some that are still in review, they are not published yet, or they are due for review, you're looking at it, you're telling them to send you the current documents. You will then document the policy compliance, verify that they've been implemented, identify gaps and non-compliance, see whether there are violations or whether they're effective. You will then communicate your findings and then, of course, develop an action plan, corrective action plan. So this is the aspect of gathering information security policies to plan. In terms of the previous audit reports, you are reviewing the, actually, I think it's the last two audits, depending, especially for highly regulated places, you're looking at the last two audits. But if they're not so tightly regulated, then you're just looking at the previous audit report. The last period. The reason why you might want to look at the last two is if there is a trend. Okay, so if they are notorious, you want to look at the last two audit reports and see what they have. And sometimes if you look at the previous audit report, it might point you to look at the previous audit report as well, because it will indicate that something has been there. And as you're here, there's no correction, so you might want to go further back, okay? And then, of course, document your findings from that. This slide is showing us an audit scoring or rating system, and it is especially relevant for external audits. Remember yesterday I said in some parts, you will look at things from an internal audit perspective and other times from an external certification audit perspective or third-party perspective. So this table or rating system is typically used in an external audit. In internal audit, you might score it the way you want to say, oh, this is our this department scored high, this one scored low. It might be just that simple, or whatever way they have defined it. The audit manager may have created a rating system. So if it's an external audit, this is the scoring system. You'll see in areas where they conform, whether the department or the clause or the section, you will say in conformity. Okay. How do you mitigate that? There's no mitigation. You just check again next time. Then there is opportunity for improvement. It is not as good as conformity. That means they are not fulfilling the requirement. Conformity is the requirement says so and so, and they've done so and so. They are in conformity. What they are required to do, they have done. And it's that conformity is discovered when you do that review, when you do that audit. But an opportunity for improvement is a no or low risk. So you remember, you're using risk appetite to audit them. And if it's opportunity for improvement, it's low risk. Yeah, they don't have an obligation to do any correction. For example, processes could be simplified. So maybe it's just complex. They meet their objectives, they meet their targets, but it's just complicated. It's not easy to do. So you can tell them, instead of doing it manually, why don't you automate it? It takes too long to churn out. Why don't you do blah, blah, blah? They don't have to do it. It's down to them because it meets the objective, it meets the target, and then, of course, it is low risk. It doesn't affect the effectiveness. It doesn't affect anything, the operations. Okay, so the action or mitigation, consider implementing improvements and monitor trends or indicators to see if improvements have been achieved. That's what you recommend. For minor non-conformity, it is medium risk or minor non-conformity that results from deviations from process definitions. They are unlikely to result in the failure of the process or of the control, or even to reduce the effectiveness of the ISMS. They will not result. They don't affect risk. Okay, so since I've been using driving as an illustration, minor non-conformity, if you think about it in the driving world, driving lessons or getting your license, there are those things that are not regarded as major to fail you. You drive well, you do your traffication well, you turn well, you do your parking well, you move well, and there are no safety, you have not broken any hazard rules. You're good with your hazards. It's just minor. You stepped on your brake too hard. It's minor non-conformity, okay? You will investigate root causes and implement corrective actions. Those corrective actions, you would check on them at the next scheduled audit. Major non-conformity, where controls don't do what they're supposed to. Control is not effective, non-existent, requirement is there, and they don't fulfill the requirement. So if there's clause 4, they haven't done clause 4. There's clause 5, which its sub-clauses, they have not fulfilled clause 5. That is a major, okay? It is a major non-conformity. It is a high risk. It can, because if they don't fulfill a clause, the ISMS is not complete, okay? So it affects the effectiveness of the ISMS. It's a preventive control. It doesn't prevent. And the risk appetite says so and so. You will also refer to the risk appetite, okay? The mitigation, you will recommend immediate containment action. They must investigate the root cause and create a corrective action plan. You can set 4 weeks to re-audit and verify, because in an external audit, a major non-conformity means they will not get certified. And so to get certified, especially if they can do it within 4 weeks, they must create a corrective action, and then you verify it before you give them that pass mark to say, go ahead and apply for certification. Chris, any question? I expect you to ask here.
I was going to ask that you should take that line again, the
Which one?
4-week cycle with respect to
Yeah. Very
corrective
good.
action and non-conformity.
No problem. We will do it again at the last day, but let me say it here now. Because when you are recommending, there are 4 conditions. When they are in conformity, of course, you will say recommended for certification. Opportunity for improvement, also recommended for certification. Minor nonconformity can accumulate too many minor nonconformity that it's now a major nonconformity, especially if it's repeated or it has now affected the risk appetite. And also, as you may be directed by the certification body, that so number of minor conformity is 1 major nonconformity. They don't need more than 1 major nonconformity to not be recommended for certification. So minor nonconformity, you can check at the next scheduled audit only. It becomes a major. Now, for a major nonconformity, typically it is conditional and a no-go. So if it's something they cannot fix within 4 weeks, you will not recommend it for
No
certification.
certification.
No
Yes.
certification, absolutely. But if it's something they can fix within 4 weeks, maybe it's a budgetary thing, or it's an employment thing, or it's a freeze, an operational freeze thing, you can give them 4 weeks. That means it is conditional. They can be certified after corrective action. The corrective action within 4 weeks. Okay?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
So
yeah,
non-conformities, whether major or minor, are against
fulfillment of
requirement.
requirement. Yes.
Now,
So
when
non-conformity.
yeah, go on. Sorry.
So conformity, like I told you, is that here's the requirement and you conform. You do what it asks.
Yeah.
Non-conformity, where it says you shall, you haven't
Yeah.
done that shall. That's non-conformity. And then you have to now gauge, oh, is it major or is it minor?
Yeah.
It is minor when so as an example, I told you about documentation and control. If they have the documentation but the control isn't working, that is major. But it is minor if the document isn't there, but the control is effective. It's there. They're doing it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Nobody is intruding. The control works. It's just the documentation isn't there. That would be a minor. Okay.
Yeah. So let me go back to the question I wanted to ask. So non-conformities are against clauses or requirements.
Against requirements.
However,
you don't fulfill requirement. Yeah.
Yeah. When you have several minors, which
It can be
equates to a major, how then do
yeah.
you document that? Against what?
Against the rule. Every audit. Don't forget, every audit you have rule. You have engagement letter that tells you what you would do. They tell you if you're doing, especially remember I told you this is a certification audit. I mean, it's external. The certification body that would engage you would tell you how to score. Nothing will be, you will not be guessing anything. So they'll tell you how many minor will be a major. If it's 3 from one area, that is a major. If it's 3 from different areas, it's just still minor nonconformity. So 1 area, 3 nonconformities is major. So you will know, they will tell you how to score it. Yeah? Rennie?
Yes, so I have a question regarding the certification process. So once you've done the audit and you're recommending them for certification, it is your findings and your recommendations that the certification body would look into before certifying them. Is that all?
That's why they sent you out. They can take a decision against what you tell them. So you are only recommending for certification, but they'll look at other things. They'll look at what is in the news. They'll look at maybe feedback, suggestions, and all that. You might recommend something and they might not follow it, but the primary place they look at is your recommendation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Very good. So this is the scoring system, and this is an example checklist. You will create a checklist for all the clauses, okay? And even your audit plan is similar to the checklist. The audit plan will be, right, for this clause, this is what we're going to check. We're going to check this document. We're going to interview these people. We're going to check these documents. Remember, it's more than one. We're going to interview these people. So you would have planned it. The audit plan would have who to speak with, what to check for what kind of evidence you look for, and what will make it good evidence. Okay. But of course, it can go with your checklist. You can have a separate checklist, you can have a separate audit plan, or it can be one audit plan and checklist. And you do that for every clause. What are we going to ask them? We will ask them two things in 4.2. Why? Because there are two parts in 4.2. It asks that they determine interested parties that are relevant. It also asks that they determine the requirements of interested parties. So, yeah. Now, you'll see that good audit says to not ask open-ended questions. So this checklist guides you. This is not what you are asking them. If it's what you want to ask them, then you ask open-ended questions. Instead of have you, and then they will answer yes or no. You say things like, show me how you have determined. Okay? When you ask the what, where, when, why, and how, you give them the opportunity to explain rather than just answering yes or no. Okay? Ask to let them explain rather than just giving you those are called these are called close-ended questions. When you ask open-ended questions, you allow them explain or give you more meat to the bone. Yeah, I'll skip this because we'll do the meeting part again. This is where I want us to close, and that I told you is important. When you do a risk-based audit, how do you know which departments to audit this quarter or which department to audit first? You do the identification of key risk areas, what we call weighted scoring. So you do for the IT department, which gives you a total of 3.9 as an example. You would also do for other departments like finance, HR, and the score they give will determine which ones will take precedence or will be priority. So if IT has scored 3.9, HR has scored 4.2, and finance has scored, say, 3.1, you say, oh, we'll do HR first, then IT before finance because of the scoring. Even though the scores may be 4.2, 3.9, and 3.1, management can override your scoring because with this, you can go and present it to management and say, hey, we're going to audit HR first because they scored 4.2. But they can override that and say, no, let's do IT first. Why? Because in financial impact, IT scored highest, even though overall HR scored highest. But the fact that financial impact, IT has a greater financial impact, they can say audit that first. Okay, don't forget, planning must be agreed and approved. Okay, and for this internal audit team, they've given them financial impact, regulatory compliance, operational importance, strategic significance, reputational risk, and legal risk as the criteria. The weighting must equal to 100. Let's see if this equals to 100. If it doesn't, then they must correct it. This is 50, 70. It isn't. So this is wrong. It has to be corrected. It must equal to 100.
105.
Aha, so there's something wrong there.
Strategic should be 10.
Aha, it should be 10 for IT. And if it's 10, then it means this is 0.2. And if it's 0.2, then this is 3.8. So that's it. You will need to do this for every department that is, that's how you know, oh, let's not audit facilities as an example. Because imagine facilities, would it have strategic significance? It might be 1. The risk score might be 1. Meanwhile, I've not told you what the risk score is. So the weight is given by management. Okay. And you will also know, you'll see it. IT has financial impact. How? They would describe what that financial impact. Regulatory compliance. You can imagine that HR would have the Employment Act. They will have GDPR and others, but IT only have GDPR. Okay, so regulatory compliance for them, their risk score will be 3. And it goes from low to very high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The risk score. How much are they relevant to this criteria? And the weight is the same for every department. So the risk score depends on the department. The weighting is defined for every. So if we see this for finance, the weight will be the same against all these criteria. It's the risk score that will be different because it depends on the department. So for operational importance, HR would not have, will it have high operational importance? I think so. People. Okay. Reputational risk. IT should be lower than that, but let's just assume it's a 3. HR will be even lower.
Right, this is
Finance.
slightly confusing.
Okay. What's confusing you?
What is confusing is, say, IT department, right? This is identifying risk areas for IT department. Now, who identifies this criteria? Is it the management or yourself? The auditor.
The auditor, the audit manager,
The audit manager, and where
because he runs the department. Yeah.
the audit manager identifies these, right?
Yes.
And hands it to the auditor.
Hands it to the auditor, but before he hands it to the auditor, will agree it with management, because you are saying the essence for this is to say which departments are going to audit, say this quarter. Why are you auditing IT, finance, HR when they have 10 departments? Why are you auditing 3? It's because you want to know which ones are priority. Is to make the essence of this is to prioritize the auditing. You can't audit everything this quarter. So to prioritize, you do something like this. You're identifying key risk areas. So that's the background.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's just that in reality, where you don't find audit manager roles, where you have somebody simply playing this role at a particular time, they don't necessarily come up with this sort of chart.
They do. They don't have to make it technical or scientific, but they have. As an example, I just did one recently, and I knocked off. So I had finance, I had HR, I had what they call energy consulting, I had marketing, I had low carbon unit, low carbon business unit. And I told them, low carbon business unit, financial impact, nothing. Their budget is drawn from another department. Operational importance, they only have 3 people in that department. Reputational risk, even if you say that department is gone, their responsibilities can be given to someone else. So I did not have to write out this table like this, but in the back of my mind, I was doing the calculation. So you don't need to do this, but you see, in proper auditing, this concept is a reality. If you are going to maintain your credit scores in auditing, they will ask you this. So when you put your responsibility, how do you identify key risk areas? This is an important thing to do. So it doesn't always have to be scientific like this, but it's a concept that is there.
I think if we can do an exercise on this, it would help.
Rather than what I've done instead is I've created a case study and a template that I can share with you.
Okay, yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah, but for exercises, that'll be day 3. After day 3, that you'll do it, not tonight, because I think I gave you homework already.
Yes.
Yeah, Rennie.
So my question is related to the criteria. Who sets the criteria? Is this an industry standard criteria?
No. The one I said I did recently was only 5. It comes from the context of the organization. So you need, so before you say, oh, don't forget you have an audit charter, and in terms of the structure of auditing, you typically should have an audit committee who you report to. So you need to discuss this in the committee to say, oh, We'll identify key risk areas. It's something that comes out of discussions. What are you going to audit every department? It's not possible, especially if it's a large organization. It's not possible to audit every department every quarter, right? So when you want to plan out your audit program, this is one of the things that comes out of it. You say, okay, which department how do we know who to audit this? Why should we audit 3 first? Why should we take our best auditors and send them to IT or send them to finance? It's things like this because it's called materiality in auditing. These are the material areas. These are the things that are material to this organization. If say as an example, if the IT department doesn't work very well or there's a breach in the IT department, we will get fined. If there's a data breach in HR because of data protection or employment act, we can lose our license. We can get fined 4% of our global revenue. So financial impact in this department is high. That's why I say you might not write it out like this, but it exists. You're considering it. Any breach that occurs in personal information, and meanwhile, IT department has personal information. Oh, there's a lot of personal information in HR. There's no personal information in facilities. So that means that in the context of the organization, these are important departments. They are the ones that handle our business data. If there's a breach there, we might lose all our customers. Our CRM, customer relationship management system, is in marketing. That's where all our contact details of our businesses are. What if hackers? Operationally, that's very important. They are a 5, in fact. That's where all our customer details and the information we are protecting is in the CRM. We don't have any other personal information. We don't use any other information. This is what is important to us. Yeah, that's why I say for a marketing company, yes, so the context you will know it from the context of the organization that these are the things to look at. If what's the other one now? If you're a pharmaceutical or if intellectual property is important to you, which department uses intellectual property? Which department stores it? Which department does it touch? That makes it important. Which department is responsible for it? And that's what you're all about. Every other department is just a supporting department. So the context of the organization would, and it's not just the audit manager that will do it. They can do it and present it, but usually it's a committee that sits down and deliberate. But the audit manager must lead and say, this is how I want to prioritize the auditing.
Roy, in my experience, I think what you're explaining is critical because in organizations, you have the board, then you have the audit and it's committee really who now determine they look at the audit plan for the next 3 years and then each year determine the areas of priority.
They look at the program,
Yes, linked back to the risk map actually. They're kind of all linked in terms of the risk map and the areas of importance and the areas of exposure, compliance. So for instance, the areas I've worked in housing, for instance, health and safety, safeguarding, all those areas that expose the business in terms of data and compliance and so on.
Absolutely.
People's safety really. It's always looked at. Like internal auditors and then the external audit program is informed by that as well. So yeah, I think a case study will help. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So they're all tied. Auditing is a risk function. So there's no way you will not look which one would impact the organization. Where would they have the highest impact? What will affect them? What could make them lose their license? You must be enhancing them. You must be supporting them. Okay, so that's how you draw the criteria. The audit manager would decide. Okay, financial impact is always usual to see. I've seen it in 3 different places. Financial impact, regulatory compliance is always important. Operational is common. Not everyone has strategic significance. Not everyone has reputation and legal. Yeah, business impact, some express it as business impact. Some just lump them all together as risk. Strategic, reputational, legal, they just put them all together. Yeah, because you've already put regulatory anyway. Okay. Good. So I will send the recording to you tonight, and might be tonight as well. I'll send you the case study. for a full expression of how to do this as well. So it's a step-by-step on how to do this. Yep. And anything else, you might get it during the week. Don't forget, you can contact me. If there's anything I've forgotten to give, or if there's anyone I've missed to send this to, send me an email and I'll send it to you. Don't forget your homework, and I'll see you same time next week, Saturday, for day 3. Any questions before we go anywhere? So you've got time to ask questions.
You get me?
Yeah, Olan?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask about the audit is done yearly, and if how long does is it through the year that you prepare for that, the one for the year, or how does it, is it 2 months to the end of the year, or since it's meant to be yearly?
Well, if it's yearly and it's an external audit, is that what you're asking?
Internal.
Internal audit can be 3 times a year. You can do it in between. It doesn't have to be yearly. Why would you make it yearly? You do it yearly if it's a large organization, and even if it's yearly, you looked at IT this year. You don't have to look at IT next year. Internal audit goes with what helps the business. It's not cast in stone. Internal audit is basically what helps the business. But if it's ISMS, as it is ISMS says you must audit at least once a year before the external audit. That's why you do it. But in determining where to do it, you can decide, oh, based on the risk criticality, we'll look at IT, we'll look at finance. You don't have to look at everything within the year. But in the cycle of 3 years, you must have covered the whole ISMS scope. Remember what I said yesterday? Alan, you weren't there. We talked about the ISMS scope and the audit scope. Okay, the audit scope can be small, while the ISMS scope can be very big, the whole organization. If we're going to audit the whole organization, we can plan it, the program for the next 3 years. This is how we're going to audit. We're going to audit 3 departments this year, audit 3 departments next year, audit another 3 departments the year after, all depending on criticality. Eventually, we would have audited the whole ISMS in those 3 years, but per year, we've got 9 departments. We're going to do 3, 3, 3. Or we'll do 3 because one department that we do this year is critical. We'll also look at it next year with the other 3 next year and even the year after. So it all depends. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense, Orlando?
Yes. Thank you.
Good, good. Chris, you were going to ask something.
No. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Okay, then. I save you 10 minutes tonight. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.
Cheers.